Hey everyone, welcome on into another episode of the GSMC Football Podcast. I am once again your host, Matthew Quinn. We are, as always, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I do appreciate you guys all tuning in for tonight's show. We do have a great show for you today. We'll be covering a number of topics. Mainly the number one topic we're going to be covering is the Derek Carr situation, the injury that just recently popped up that could cause him to miss the entire upcoming season. We're going to talk a little bit about that and how that might impact other guys that are looking for homes at this point. Also, we are also going to talk about some best and worst case scenarios for a couple of NFL teams, and then more later in the show. Just make sure you stick around. We're going to be talking some college football. We're going to do some previews for Indiana and Boise State. Boise State obviously losing the much praised running back Ashton Genty into this coming draft. So we're going to talk about what they could potentially be doing going forward in this coming season. So before we go ahead and get started, I just want to ask that you guys like and you follow the show. If you got a question during the show that you want to ask, comment, anything like that, definitely go ahead and hit our super chat button, and you can make your voice heard there. Your input is a big part of what makes this show great. So we thrive on your energy and your insights, whether it's a quick comment or a thoughtful question, or just an opinion that you just want to share. Don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. Now, if you want to make absolutely sure that your message stands out and gets featured on the show, just go ahead and hit the super chat feature. Just click the $sign at the bottom of the chat box, to send in your super chat. This guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you all the sports content that you love, so we appreciate all of your support. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking. Hit that super chat button. Let's keep the show interactive and exciting. And if you prefer, you can also go to GSMCsports.net, tip, donate, leave a comment or a question there. We couldn't do what we do without you guys, so we're so thankful to have you as part of our community. So again, that link is GSMCsports.net. All right, so let's go ahead and get into our show here. Obviously, the first topic I want to talk about is the Derek Carr injury that just recently popped up over the past couple days or so. Recently, it came out saying that Derek Carr had a previous shoulder injury that he may now need surgery for. So that would potentially keep him out for this upcoming season. So that kind of throws a wrench in a lot of different stories, or a lot of different plans that maybe some other teams might be having. Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins mainly are the two guys that come to mind when I heard this, news, as well as, to a lesser extent, Shedeur Sanders. But, who knows, they may decide to go his route in the draft now. But the reason why I kind of think they maybe go veteran quarterback is, they could potentially want to get their guy next year. They still do have Spencer Rattler on the roster, so I don't think that they're super confident in him leading the way the entire season. So Aaron Rodgers has been looking for a team. I know he's been connected with the Steelers basically the entire offseason, but he's also kind of shown signs that he is open to other teams, because the Vikings still have not closed their door on a potential Aaron Rodgers union. So maybe the Saints, possibly, with Kellen Moore as the new head coach there. He's an offensive-minded guy. There's a few things that could benefit Aaron Rodgers playing with the Saints, is that he wouldn't have to worry about cold weather or anything. I know he said that in the past, leading up to this whole Steelers, trade rumors or, free agency rumors or whatever the case. That he is potentially wanting to play in a warmer climate, and that checks the box as well. But the Saints have a dome, so obviously, weather's not going to really be a factor there. So that's, a possibility for him, I think. The only issue with the Saints is they don't have a ton of cap space. They're kind of in cap hell right now. But they could move some things around potentially to make some space to be able to maybe get Aaron Rodgers or, Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins would probably have to come via trade, and I don't know how much assets other than maybe a couple of first-round picks that Atlanta might want in exchange for the Saints. But at the same time, are they going to trade within the division? I don't really think that's going to be too much of an issue because, Kirk Cousins was not going to be the starter in Atlanta anyway. So this gives Kirk Cousins an opportunity to be a guaranteed starter. So if they, for some reason, cut Kirk Cousins, he's most likely going to probably want to get paid a decent amount, but will he take a pay cut to go with the Saints given their cap issues? Who knows? That's a whole other conversation. We can discuss that if or when it happens in terms of the financial aspects of it. Just in terms of football aspects, though, it would make sense, in my opinion, for Kirk Cousins more so than Aaron Rodgers to go to the Saints, just because, I think that Kirk Cousins would be better suited in that situation, playing in a dome, which he's accustomed to playing in a dome. And then this would give, the Saints, who already have a decent young receiver in Chris Olave, maybe they go get somebody in the draft, and then they can kind of bolster that young offense, and maybe Kirk Cousins could potentially thrive in that situation. Now, there's a very good chance that would not work out. Offensive line issues or whatever the case, new head coach, rookie head coach in that regard too. So there could be some bumps and bruises along the way there. But also the thing with Kirk Cousins is he's probably going to want a multi-year deal, and I don't know if the Saints would be willing to commit to that with Derek Carr still on the roster, especially after they had reworked his deal over this offseason to, essentially keep him there. So it looks like the Saints need or want Derek Carr to stay there. So maybe they go and get Aaron Rodgers, because Aaron Rodgers would only be a 1-year deal. So you could, essentially sign Aaron Rodgers, have him be your quarterback this year if Derek Carr is out for the year. And then you don't have to worry about any kind of quarterback competition or controversy or whatever, because you only have Aaron Rodgers for 1 season. And then you get Derek Carr to, run the ship the very next year. If you want to draft a quarterback in the first round that year, then you have Derek Carr be the guy that starts, and then you have your rookie kind of learn behind him. I think that would be a decent strategy if the Saints wanted to do that. It's just going to depend on the money in terms of Aaron Rodgers, how much he is, going to be willing to take, because I don't think the Saints are going to throw a ton of money at Aaron Rodgers, just because I don't think they have the money to throw at Aaron Rodgers. So it's a possibility, though. So if Aaron Rodgers still wants to play, I know it's not a contender, but, I've made the argument several times that the Steelers are not a contender either, but he was, flirting with them, of course. So I don't think it's so much that. I think it's maybe just an issue of he wanting to, play at least 1 more year or not. So in that case, this would give him the opportunity to play. So it's an interesting fit no matter where you go. Or, the Saints could go a completely different direction and go a guy like Carson Wentz and have him just be the starter this year, just assuming that it's going to be, not a great year and that you're just preparing for next year with this Derek Carr news. So, that's a possibility as well. I think it's going to be more likely that they address it via the draft. It wouldn't surprise me, because there's been talk that maybe Shedeur Sanders could go to New Orleans, and that, the more and more I think about it, the more it kind of makes sense. But at the same time, are you willing to waste, or I wouldn't say waste, are you willing to use a 8th or 9th overall pick? I forget what exactly it is, but I believe it's the 9th pick, actually. Are you willing to use that 9th pick overall to go after a quarterback when the quarterback draft class really only has 1 quarterback in it that is top 10 worthy, and he's going number 1, and that's Cam Ward? I wouldn't give Shedeur Sanders as much credit. I don't think that he is a top 10 quarterback in this draft. Or a top 10 player, in this draft. So he may be top 10 quarterback, sure, but not top 10 player. And, the Saints would be picking at 9. So I think Shedeur Sanders is most likely to fall a little bit later than that. But who knows? This news with Derek Carr could change how the Saints approach the draft. Whether they want to just go after maybe a weapon for whoever they decide to bring in at quarterback, because I really would be very surprised if they, ran the season out, assuming Derek Carr is out for the year. If they ran the season out with Spencer Rattler, I just don't believe that that's going to happen, especially with Kellen Moore with his first year as the head coach there. I don't think that he's going to want to start his career as a coach there with Spencer Rattler as his starter. He's going to probably want to make a play for Aaron Rodgers, I would imagine, or, like I said, trade for Kirk Cousins, or maybe, like I said, maybe they go Carson Wentz or one of the other, backups that are out there that are available that can come in and potentially win a couple games for you. But who knows? But this whole Derek Carr injury is kind of came out of nowhere as well. Nobody was really talking about much. Everybody was just kind of getting ready for the draft, and then all of a sudden this news hit that Derek Carr had this injury all of a sudden, and then it could potentially cost him the 2025 season. There were even players that appeared to be kind of surprised by this, players within the Saints locker room. That's what reports are coming out saying. So that's, a news story in itself. The players are kind of surprised by it. Just kind of came out of nowhere. But if this whole thing is a real thing and Derek Carr is out for this coming season, then it's going to be very interesting to see what the Saints do on draft night in particular in just a few days at this point, just over a week, really. It's coming right up here. So this could throw a wrench in a lot of other teams' plans as well, depending on what the Saints decide to do. Now, if the Saints decide that they want to go out and get a guy like Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins, then it doesn't really change the NFL draft too much. Maybe it changes what like a team like the Steelers would possibly do, knowing that they would not be getting Aaron Rodgers, so they'd be a little bit more aggressive in towards getting a quarterback this year, even though I still believe they're going to go defensive line regardless if they sign Aaron Rodgers or not. But that's just my opinion. But so that was the news that kind of came out with Derek Carr. So that's kind of all I have on that. There hasn't really been much other than what I've already said here, just about his shoulder injury and everything. So when we come back, we're just going to take a quick break here. So when we come back, we're going to dive on in to the season previews, or best and worst case scenarios in this case, for two NFL teams, kind of bouncing around conferences today, doing the Giants and the Jags, mainly because we're getting close to the NFL draft, and both of those teams are picking in the top 5 in the NFL draft this year. So we're going to talk about them when we come back right after this. So just stick with us. We'll be right back.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, guys, welcome back to the second segment here on the show. Before we go ahead and get into the Giants' best worst case scenario, before we do that, just want to remind you guys that if you have a question or a comment or anything that you want to add to the show, just go ahead and head over to our super chat. That's gsmcsports.net. If you want to tip, donate, or leave a question or a comment there, contribute to the show in any way, always appreciated and always welcomed. So let's go ahead and get into the rest of our show here. The second segment that I have here is the New York Giants. That's who we're going to be talking about tonight on best worst case scenario. The Giants they've got a lot of pressure on the coaching staff and general manager this coming season to put forth some kind of product that would be, relatively successful. Now, last year, obviously, they finished 3-14. They were dead last in the NFC East. They cut Daniel Jones, of course, during the season, and he bounced around. He went to Minnesota during last year, but then ultimately this offseason landed in Indianapolis, and he's going to battle with Anthony Richardson to be the quarterback there. So they don't have that same guy anymore. They went ahead and they got Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston to back him up to basically boost that quarterback room. So there will be better quarterback play overall this coming season. There should be, at least, for the Giants. So they at least have that going for them. But last year, under Daniel Jones and, of course, Tommy DeVito and Drew Lock, when Drew Lock was there, who actually just recently got re-signed by the Seattle Seahawks. Of course, he was there a few years ago. So he's back there now, too. So when Daniel Jones and company were running the team last year, they finished 28th in passing yards per game, 23rd in rushing yards per game, and 30th overall in total yards per game. Their defense wasn't great, other than Dexter Lawrence leading or helping a 7th-ranked team in sacks on defense. Dexter Lawrence was very, very good last year, and he still continues to be a beast on the interior of that defensive line as well. So their secondary was decent as well. They were 8th against the pass, but their issue really was rushing yards. They gave up a lot of yards on the ground, which is surprising considering you've got Dexter Lawrence on that defensive line. So it's kind of surprising that it ended up being as bad as it was, but they were 27th in the NFL in rushing yards allowed per game. In terms of their statistics overall or individually, Daniel Jones had just over 2,000 yards passing before he was eventually benched and then cut, had 8 touchdowns, 7 interceptions in the 10 games that he appeared in. Tommy DeVito was the only other quarterback on the roster right at the end of last season, and then, of course, they went ahead and they signed Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, and Tommy DeVito is still there, but it's pretty much a new quarterback room for the most part. But last year, there was some bright spots, particularly wide receiver Malik Nabers. He was fantastic for the Giants and a offense that struggled mostly for, the most part of the year. But, Malik Nabers did not. He had over 1,200 yards receiving and 7 touchdowns. And now that he has Russell Wilson, who is very good at the deep ball and things like that, he could end up having a pretty, an even better season numbers-wise, potentially. It's going to really depend on the kind of game plan that they, put forth. If it's anything that's similar to last year or similar to what Russell Wilson was doing in Pittsburgh, then you could see Malik Nabers getting close to the 1,200-yard mark, but maybe not quite reaching it. Just because Russell Wilson doesn't really throw over the middle of the field, and I do believe Malik Nabers is a very good route runner, and he can get those, over the middle passes as well as those deep shots too. So you'd be kind of taking away a chunk of his game with Russell Wilson, a chunk of a lot of the receivers' games in terms of slot receivers and things like that, because Russell Wilson just doesn't throw the ball over the middle of the field much. Didn't do it in Pittsburgh, hasn't done it most of his career, mainly because of his height. He always has to escape the pocket to be able to, get a better read downfield, and he doesn't really ever go over the middle of the field that much. But that's going to be an issue the Giants are going to have to deal with this coming season. Obviously, they do also have Jameis Winston on the roster, so if Russell Wilson were to get hurt or anything like that, because he missed 6 games last year for the Steelers due to his, calf injury that he suffered in training camp pushing a sled. So that, is a possibility that he could miss some time. So you put Jameis Winston in there, and Jameis Winston is the type of quarterback that can either get you, 500 yards, 4 or 5 touchdowns, but can also throw 4 or 5 interceptions in the same game. So he's very hot and cold. You don't really know what you're going to get out of Jameis. I mean, he's fun, he's a fun personality, and he's, fun when he's playing well, especially. But he's just not, he's too inconsistent overall. So he's not your answer or anything. So I think the Giants are really just looking towards getting a quarterback next year. I don't think they draft one with that number 3 overall pick. There's been talk that maybe they go Travis Hunter. I could see them doing that because they need an extra playmaker on offense, or maybe they want to use him for defense. Who knows? But he has the ability to do both. Abdul Carter is also possibly going to be there depending on what the Browns do. The Browns have been linked to him, and of course the Titans are of course taking Cam Ward. Everybody knows that. But the Browns potentially taking Abdul Carter could affect what the Giants do. But I think it wouldn't be surprising to see the Browns go Travis Hunter, and then that would leave an Abdul Carter available for the Giants to take. I just don't think they're going to go quarterback that early on. Maybe they go quarterback in the later rounds, grab a guy, like Tyler Shuck from Louisville, or, maybe Jalen Milroe if he falls. I know he's been linked to the Steelers at 21. Don't know if that's going to happen. It also depends on what happens with Aaron Rodgers in terms of that. But with the Giants, they don't need quarterback. They've bought themselves some time now, so they don't need to go quarterback with the first round, with their first pick this year. So that gives them a few different options. They're not going to trade up. That's most likely not going to be the case. Early in the offseason, it was looking like they could potentially trade up with the Titans and maybe go get Cam Ward. But now the way everything has kind of shaked out as we get closer to the draft, it's not looking like that's going to be an option at all. So they will ride with Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, and then of course have Tommy DeVito as the third string guy. But who knows what they're going to do overall. But, in free agency, they did get a couple of guys. They got Javon Holland in free agency, the safety from Miami. So that is definitely a good get. That makes their defense a little bit better as well. And they also re-signed some guys on the offensive line, guys like Greg Van Roten. And, of course, re-signing Darius Slayton at wide receiver helps them out as well. So it's going to be an interesting watch on this draft. There's a lot of teams that have a lot of interesting storylines to kind of address. The Giants are one of them. Of course, it's going to be, this whole draft is probably going to hinge on those first 3 picks of the draft with the Titans, Browns, and Giants. And then once those 3 are done, then it's going to be kind of wide open. I think there's going to be a good mix of different positions going. And I don't think there is a team that is in desperate need of a quarterback after those first 3, except for maybe that new development we talked about in the first segment with the Saints. So outside of them, I don't think there's another team that desperately needs a quarterback until, say, 21 when the Steelers pick. So we'll see. It's going to be a fun process to watch. But we're going to take another break. When we come back, we're going to do the same segment here, although we're going to talk about the Jaguars. So I just realized I didn't actually do best worst case scenario for the Giants, but best case scenario for the Giants is, Russell Wilson gets them to a good 6 or 7 wins, something like that. That's what I believe that they're, capable of. Their ceiling really this year. Worst case scenario is it just goes terribly and, Brian Daboll and Joe Shane are both fired mid-season. Russell Wilson doesn't work out or he gets injured, and then Jameis Winston has to step in, and then Jameis is throwing a ton of interceptions, and they just lose a ton of games, and they're in the same spot next year. So that's probably worst case scenario. But sorry, I forgot to even completely add that in. So, but now we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the same situation, only we're going to talk about the Jags. So stick with us, and we will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, guys, welcome back to the next segment here on our show. We're going to talk about the Jags and their best and worst case scenarios. Now, obviously, the Jaguars are picking in the top 5 in the NFL draft here in the next couple weeks or so. Last year wasn't the greatest year for the Jags overall. Finished 4-13. Fired both head coach Doug Peterson and general manager Trent Baalke in the offseason, and a very interesting acquisition, to say the least, of Tampa offensive coordinator Liam Cohen to be their next head coach. The issues surrounding the Jaguars kind of all sort of surround Trevor Lawrence. He had an injury-riddled year this past season, so he hasn't really lived up to the contract that he, got over the last offseason. Really, he hasn't, I don't believe he hasn't earned enough or, played well enough to earn that kind of a contract in the first place. And since, of course, signing the contract, he has been in and out of the lineup with injury. So he has kind of, been very inconsistent. I mean, the first year when he was a rookie, a lot of people kind of throw that out because, the head coach situation was just horrible. Urban Meyer was one of the worst NFL head coaches in recent memory. So obviously Trevor Lawrence did not play as well as he could have as a rookie. And that kind of stunted his growth a little bit. So once they got Doug Peterson, there were some signs that he was a talented quarterback, but still never really materialized into anything that was, really legit in terms of being a contender. And now that Doug Peterson is gone and Trent Baalke, the general manager, is gone, now they have another new regime under Trevor Lawrence. So this is now the third head coach that Trevor Lawrence has been through. Now, Liam Cohen is a good offensive mind, so it is a possibility that the Jags are better offensively, and obviously they have good talent. They have talented players on offense with Brian Thomas Jr. at receiver, the young receiver who was trailing only Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson in terms of receiving yards last year as a rookie. So he was really, really good. They won't have Evan Engram anymore. He is now with the Denver Broncos, so that is definitely a loss as well. There are some other players that they can go out and get via the draft. I do think that they're going to go Mason Graham with their first overall pick just to shore up that defensive line a little bit. And they just restructured or, took the fifth-year option of Trayvon Walker, the defensive end. So that was just a few days ago. So that is, assuring that at least one of their better players on defense is going to be around for at least one more year. And then most likely you would imagine that they're going to negotiate a contract throughout the course of the year or something like that. So we'll have to see. But last year, like I said, was a very forgettable year for the Jaguars. They had to start Mac Jones in 7 games overall due to Trevor's injuries, and he was 2-5 as a starter. So both offense and defense ranked near the bottom of the league last year. Like I said before, Brian Thomas was the bright spot on offense. Their dynamic running game has, well, at least I should say it has potential to be dynamic with Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby, both talented running backs. And it is a pretty solid class in the draft this year, too, so I wouldn't completely rule it out that they add another running back at some point during the draft, just possibly not the first round overall, but it would be an asset to them. Travis, his brother, is actually in the NFL draft this year. Trevor Etienne, coming out of Georgia, and was also with Florida for most of his college career, but spent last year with Georgia. So that would be an interesting pairing to have both brothers in the backfield as well. But like I said, the Jags don't need there's not a glaring need at running back right now. They can, go at least another year or so with Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby, and maybe another guy that they bring in through the draft since it's such a good class. So they need to improve overall anyway, all the way across the board. It's not just running the ball. Defensively, they need to be better. They were 26th in points per game, but 27th in points allowed last year. So the defense was also dead last as far as takeaways are concerned. Didn't get too many turnovers overall. They were offensively giving the ball away a lot, and that you could say is contributed a little bit by the fact that Trevor Lawrence, his uncertainty throughout the year in terms of injury. There was a lot of questions at quarterback, so you could kind of maybe blame that. Plus the pressure in the front office for Doug Peterson, and everybody kind of knew that he was probably going to get fired, and then everybody wanted Trent Baalke fired, and then, the whole mess with Liam Cohen, his whole process of getting hired by the Jaguars was also kind of messy in a way. There was talk that Cohen didn't think that the Jags were going to fire Trent Baalke, and then he ended up leaving Jacksonville without a contract, and then Trent Baalke ends up getting fired, and then Liam Cohen decides he's not going to come back to Tampa as an offensive coordinator, but he is then going to take the Jaguars job. It was just a lot of back and forth. It was just kind of a messy situation, so not necessarily the greatest start to your regime in Jacksonville, in a notorious franchise for, struggling throughout the course of regular seasons and off seasons. So they're looking to hopefully change the recent history and kind of get back to where they were when they had that really good Saxonville defense is what they were called. So they're going to need to rebuild that defense, though, if that's going to be the case, if they want to return to how strong that defense was. Now, there was another development this year, or this past off season, or actually just a few days ago, that I actually kind of thought about when I was thinking about the Jaguars here. And Jalen Ramsey is apparently going to be traded by the Dolphins. I would not be surprised if the Jaguars make a phone call and try and get Jalen Ramsey back in Jacksonville where he started his career. That would help improve the secondary for sure. And he's not going to be as expensive as he was when he went to Miami or when he went to the Rams, or anything like that. He's been around the league a few times. Now he's a lot older, so he's not quite the guy that he once was, but he's still talented enough to be able to start in most teams' secondary. So the Jaguars need that help, and he has, familiarity with being in Jacksonville under a different coaching staff, of course, but still, fans, they take to him, they like him. So it could be an interesting matchup, or an interesting match again. So something to just kind of keep an eye on. But the other needs that the Jags have are interior offensive line. They need to upgrade that as well. Defensive line, like I said, that's why I have Mason Graham going to the Jags. I think they need to upgrade that position, and he would be an upgrade, having a young top defensive guy in the draft coming into your team. Brandon Scherf was a free agent, so he's gone. They were 32nd ranked in the NFL in terms of guards last year. That whole room, the three interior linemen that they had they were not very good. They should be all right at both tackle spots, though, but you have to think that they're probably going to try and add to the offensive line at some point during this NFL draft process here. Christian Kirk is going to be back, Evan Ingram not, so that is another hole that they're going to need to fill. It's a pretty solid group overall in terms of the tight end class, so they could maybe go tight end at some point in the draft as well. Edge rusher, of course, having Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen, pretty solid there. Restructuring or adding that fifth year, or taking that fifth year option for Trayvon Walker, definitely helps that defense as well. Like I said, secondary is a need as well, and a reunion with Jalen Ramsey I don't think is completely out of the question. I haven't seen many people talk about it in terms of like analysts on ESPN or anything like that, but I think that it's something that is worth talking about. They know each other, so why not? The Jags need a guy like him, and he needs a new, place after it not really working out in Miami. Now that they're seemingly wanting to trade him, they're also trying to trade Tyreek Hill, it seems like. So that's a whole other story. But that's going to be it for the Jags. Best case scenario for the Jags, I think they probably get somewhere along the lines of maybe about 6 wins, I think 6-7 wins possibly. If Trevor Lawrence can stay healthy and the offense can improve under Liam Cohen, I think they'll be able to score more points, but the defense still is the question. That's the area that they really need to improve still, and I'm just not confident that they're going to be able to make enough moves to completely retool that defense the way it needs to be. So I think 6-7 wins, best case scenario for the Jags. Worst case scenario is that it once again just doesn't work out. They don't have a very good draft, and then they end up with another 4-win season, and then Liam Cohen is immediately on the hot seat, because that tends to happen on teams like the Jaguars, teams that always have a ton of turnover. So that's my best worst case scenario for the Jags. When we come back, we're going to dive on into some college football and do a similar sort of thing here, only we're going to be doing it with college, and we're going to do previews of Indiana and Boise State. We're going to do Indiana first, so just stick with us, and we'll be right back right after this next break. All right, guys. Sorry about that. Had my microphone on mute there. But welcome back to the next segment of the show. Here, we're going to be talking some college football now. We're going to talk Indiana and what we think that they could potentially do this coming college football season. So, Indiana last year, much better overall season that they've really ever had. They had a school record 11 wins. They were 11-2. 8-1 in the Big Ten overall. So they were fantastic throughout the course of the season. Have a couple of losses, but they were tough losses. Ohio State was one. They played pretty well against Ohio State until later in the game, and then Ohio State kind of took over that game. But Indiana was solid overall, and they have some key returning players. Guys like the wide receiver room in Elijah Sarrett, Omar Cooper Jr., both of those guys are going to be back. Some guys along the offensive line, offensive tackle Carter Smith and Drew Evans. On defense, linebacker Aiden Fisher, D'Angelo Pons, safety Amari Farrell, and defensive end Mikhail Kamara. All of those guys are coming back, so it's going to be good for that Indiana team to have that same continuity coming back for that defense as well as on the offense. But overall, fresh off of that best season in in school history, that's 126-year history of the Indiana program. Best season that they've ever had. First season in which they've won more than 9 games. And they also reached the college football playoff, which is something that they, of course, have never done. So Kurt Cignetti, the head coach, he's basically trying to reload through the transfer portal again. Hoosiers are bringing in about 20 transfers led by former Cal quarterback Fernando Mendoza. He threw for over 3,000 yards last year, 16 touchdowns and 6 interceptions while at California. Tailback Lee Beebe Jr. from UAB, receiver Mekhi Jackson from App State, and tight end Holden Stays out of Tennessee. were also important additions via the transfer portal on offense. Defensively, Indiana has a lot of good production coming back onto the field at linebacker and quarterback in particular. Kamara's return gives them a pretty good pass rushing threat. Defensive tackles Jose Wheeler from Western Kentucky and Dominique Ratcliffe from Texas State transfers could also fill some holes in the interior line. Indiana's non-conference schedule is not necessarily what you would call super difficult. They have a lot of very, very winnable games. A lot of kind of FCS programs that they, have to play. So it's not too difficult of a schedule. Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, and an FCS team by the name of Indiana State at home. So that's not really too difficult. But as far as Big Ten games on the road, they have to go to Iowa, Oregon, and Penn State. So those are all going to be tough games. Iowa notoriously always has a very good defense. Oregon, of course, was one of the best teams in the country last year, and Penn State is looking to be one of the national title contenders this coming season. So those are all tough games. So they signed a 42-player recruiting class for this particular season, 19 transfers and 14 freshmen who have enrolled for this spring semester. They had, like I said, a historic 2024 season. Program record 11 games certainly helped, fill some of those holes, some of those transfers that they've got in this past season. But if we go by just breaking down position by position here, at quarterback, like I said before, Fernando Mendoza, he's the transfer from California. He is going to be in as the likely starter, replacing all Big Ten quarterback from last year, Curtis Rourke. 6'5", Mendoza completed 68% of his passes last year for, like I said before, over 3,000 yards and 16 touchdowns with 6 interceptions to go along with it. He was also named the ACC quarterback of the week 3 different times, and he did suffer a knee injury before the playoff. So that definitely, hurt his stock a little bit. But the other guys on the roster to fill out that quarterback room are Grant Wilson and Albert Mendoza. Tyler Cherry is not going to be on this roster. He's going to serve actually as a student coach, and he could return in 2026. So that is an interesting little nugget of information there. At running back, Indiana is, kind of having to try and pick up the pieces from their running back room from last year. They've got now on the room is Roman Hemby, Kalen Black, and Lee Beebe Jr. Beebe, of course, was there last year, but Indiana lost leading rushers Justice Ellison and Tyson Lawton, who split carries in most games and combined for about 1,500 yards and 22 touchdowns last year. So that's big production that they're going to have to replace. But they should be able to create a pretty similar dynamic, a balanced dynamic for this running group. They added Maryland transfer Roman Hemby, who rushed for 607 yards last year, and also UAB transfer Lee Beebe Jr., who rushed for 885 yards last season. So they've got a couple of guys that are capable of, getting pretty close to the same production that, of course, Justice Ellison and Tyson Lawton had last year. It's big shoes to fill, so we'll see if they can do it, but they have the players that are talented enough in that room, I believe, to be able to, offset any kind of loss that they had in the running back room. Moving on to wide receiver, Elijah Sarrett, E.J. Williams Jr., Omar Cooper Jr., Charlie Becker, Mekhi Jackson, and Tyler Morris. They fill out your wide receiver room for Indiana. Both Sarrett and Cooper return from last season after leading Indiana in receiving yards last season. They have to replace slot receivers Miles Price and Keshawn Williams and Miles Cross. Indiana also added senior transfers Tyler Morris from Michigan and Mekhi Jackson from Appalachian State. E.J. Williams also returned despite entering the transfer portal this past offseason, through the midseason. So the wide receiver room is pretty set for the most part. They should get pretty decent production out of all of the guys on that roster there, but in particular Elijah Sarrett and Omar Cooper Jr., they should all be very, very good for that Indiana team returning. And E.J. Williams, like I said before, he's coming back despite the fact that he could have potentially went to another team because he entered the transfer portal in mid-season last year. So on defense, along the defensive line, the defensive ends are Mikhail Kamara, as I said before, he is returning, and Tadarius Collins. At the defensive tackle spots, they have Tyreek Tucker, Marcus Burris Jr., Jose Wheeler, and Dominique Ratcliffe. And then the other ends are Mario Landino and Daniel Ndukwe. So Kamara returns, like we said before. He was an All-American last season. But Indiana lost a lot here in this room, though, despite the fact that Kamara is returning. C.J. West, James Carpenter, Linnell Carr Jr., and Jacob Magnum Farrar graduating. Wheeler was an All-Conference USA player last year for Western Kentucky, and Indiana is going to need him this season, and Ratcliffe also to help fill in for those departures that they have lost. But Tucker, Burris, and Landino were part of that defensive line rotation last year, so there is some experience along that line that are returning, so that's good for the Indiana defense as well. So linebackers, as we move a little bit further up into the defense, linebackers are Aiden Fisher, Isaiah Jones, Elijah Hardy, and Caden Turner. Another All-American, Aiden Fisher, is back in the middle of Indiana's defense. Hoosiers lost his running mate last year, though. That was Jalen Walker, but Jones and Hardy were third and fourth most productive on the linebacker room about a year ago. So the group isn't particularly deep, but those top three options were key to last year's group, and they also helped allow the lowest single-season scoring average and total offensive output overall in program history. So keep in mind, Indiana could play three different linebackers like it did at times last year. But for now, we'll stick with a 5 defensive back base, most likely. So not going to be a ton of turnover there. So as far as that secondary is concerned, a lot of guys, Signetti said that Indiana didn't lose a ton of people on the secondary. A lot of guys that were projected to start anyway. So that kind of implies that he had the Pittsburgh transfer Ryan Gandy and Northern Illinois transfer Marion Knighton ahead of Jameer Johnson, who was the starter last year for Indiana, but has since entered the transfer portal. So Pons is the third All-American returning on the defense, and Sharp was a regular in the rotation of the 2 previous seasons. That's Jamari Sharp, the cornerback. So safety, though, is a bit more unknown for several reasons. Their safety room is Amari Farrell, Devin Boykin, Lewis Moore, and Bryson Bonds. Farrell has played a variety of defensive back roles throughout his career at Indiana. Boykin missed the entire 2024 season with an injury, but played over 100 snaps at free safety, slot corner, and in the box when he was at NC State in 2023. Moore moved more similarly at Indiana in 2023, and after he transferred to Ole Miss in 2024, there are some nuances to be determined in the defensive backfield after losing Sean Ashbury as well as Terry Jones and Josh Sanguinetti. But the group is still shaping up pretty well. But overall, the Indiana Hoosiers should field another pretty solid team this year. They should compete for the college football playoff. It all is going to just depend on if they can get the same sort of production out of the running back room, and if the offense can, grow a little bit more. And the defense should be pretty set for the most part. So it's going to be interesting. It's a tough Big Ten conference, as we have been saying numerous times when we've been doing these previews. The Big Ten is one of the best conferences in the entire country. So it's going to be hard for Indiana to get through, but they were able to win 11 games in a tough Big Ten last year. So it's going to be an interesting season for them for sure. Expectations are definitely a lot higher than they normally have been for an Indiana team that's normally accustomed to just being very good at basketball, but not necessarily huge history with football, but they are starting to be a very good team in the Big Ten. So got to give Indiana their credit. But that's it for Indiana. When we come back, we're going to cover a team that lost a very, very pivotal player to the NFL draft this coming season. We're going to talk about Boise State. So just stick with us, and we've got one more break, and then we'll come back, and we're going to do our final segment of this show. So stick with us. We will be right back right after this. All right, guys, welcome back to the final segment of tonight's show. We're going to preview the Boise State Broncos. Boise State obviously coming off of a pretty solid year overall, getting to the playoffs, repeated as Mountain West Conference champions, and they were also selected for the college football playoffs. Both of those accomplishments were program first for Boise State. They finished 12-2 overall and fell to Penn State in the Fiesta Bowl. Ashton Jeanty, of course, was their workhorse, their guy that, they ran a lot of schemes around the offense around him. It's going to look a lot different this season for Boise State as guys like Ashton Jeanty as well as defensive end Ahmad Hassanein are moving on to the NFL. So it's going to be interesting to see how they adjust to the losses of guys like those guys. So quarterback-wise, Maddox Madsen pulled off a pretty decent surprise last August by beating out the 5-star USC transfer Malachi Nelson for that starting quarterback job. And, he made the most of it. He was a sophomore transfer from Utah, took the opportunity, ran with it. He had a pretty good completion percentage, completing 247 out of his 396 attempted passes, had over 3,000 yards, 23 touchdowns, as well as 6 interceptions. But 3 of those interceptions came in one game, and the Boise State lost to Penn State in that Fiesta Bowl. So there's something to think about, because if you take away that bowl game, then that's only 3 interceptions he threw all year. So very good at protecting the football. It helps when you've got a guy like Ashton Jeanty in the backfield who's going to take a lot of the pressure off of any quarterback. But he was also, Madsen that is, also very effective with his legs overall. He had 57 carries for the most part, 221 yards, 5 touchdowns. And he got an honorable mention in the All Mountain West Conference division. So Max Cutforth, the backup quarterback from last year, he was the backup during the Fiesta Bowl. He entered the transfer portal, but he is going to enter spring ball as the number 2 quarterback. Caleb Annett redshirted last year. He's going to begin spring practice as the 3rd-string guy. Annett was a 3-star prospect from Southern California's Corona Del Mar High School, and when he signed with Boise State back in December of 2023. Running backs, like I said, Ashton Jeanty is going to be a very, very tough guy to try and replace. His records, the records that he broke or was close to breaking last year with his total rushing yards, he was just 28 yards shy of breaking Barry Sanders' all-time record for single season rushing yards. He finished with 2,601 rushing yards, 30 total touchdowns. He topped the 100-yard mark in all 14 games that he played in, and like I said, coming up 28 yards shy of Barry Sanders. But a 100-yard running back in every single game, that's going to take a ton of pressure off of your quarterback. So that is an all-time type of player, generational talent at the running back position for Ashton Jeanty. He absolutely has that potential to be that guy. He declared, of course, for the NFL draft, and he's going to be probably the first running back taken for sure. Most likely going to go to the Raiders, I would think. That's who I mocked him to anyway. And of course, I'm no expert, so he could go somewhere completely different for all I know. But I think the Raiders make the most sense for Ashton Jeanty. But everybody at this point knows how good Jeanty was last year. He carried the ball a lot, though. He carried the ball 374 times a season ago, so that's pretty much an unrealistic number for most backs, but he's not most backs, of course. And I would struggle to think that they're going to give the ball to guys like Sire Gaines and Breezy Dunbar 374 times. They'd split that up more than likely than give one guy that many carries. They're they're pretty solid 1-2 punch, though. The injuries last year to both of those guys really, kind of compounded the additional carries that Jeanty was getting, of course. That raised his workload for sure. But he was rated the number 57 overall prospect in California for the class of 2024. So that's Sire Gaines, that is. He arrived on campus last January with some pretty big expectations, being the number 57 overall prospect in California, a state that, develops a lot of really good talent, especially at the skill positions. But he had 12 carries for 110 yards and a touchdown in Boise State's season opening win when they beat Georgia Southern. But he did suffer an ankle injury in that game, and that sidelined him for the rest of the year. So that definitely did not help him. Dubar had 25 carries for 99 yards and 2 touchdowns during his injury-plagued sophomore season. And he was a 4-star recruit coming out of Texas and a high school. So, very good running backs, very capable running backs that are going to be your 1 and 2 guys, most likely. Gaines most likely being the number 1 guy who's going to get the lion's share of the carries. And then, of course, Dubar is going to back him up. And maybe they just, run a couple other guys, for depth and things like that. But wide receiver, moving on to the other positions here on this team. Wide receiver, one thing is certain about Boise State's wide receiver room is that Latrell Caples, he's going to once again be most likely the top target of Maddox Madsen when the season gets going. He missed the 2023 season due to a ruptured Achilles, but returned to the field this past season, had 38 catches, 473 yards, and 5 touchdowns, and he enters his 6th year at Boise State with 93 career catches and just over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. So not a ton of production from Caples from overall in his entire Boise State career, but he has had injury issues in the past, so look for him to have a much better season this coming year. I think he's going to have much better numbers and could eclipse his career numbers in one season, because those numbers are not completely unattainable. 93 catches, that's a pretty high number, but the 1,078 yards, 9 touchdowns, those are possible for him to hit. But at the same time, they're not going to have the same guy on offense like Ashton Jeanty that's going to be putting pressure more so on the run game and less on the pass game. But we'll see. It's going to probably be a more evenly balanced offense, I would think, this coming season. But Caples could begin spring practice, or not begin spring practice, but he could end spring practice being the number 1 receiver with the status of Cam Camper. He was the Broncos' leading receiver last year. He had 58 catches, 903 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So his career is kind of in limbo right now. According to the head coach, Spencer Danielson, Boise State is seeking more clarity on the whole situation, determining campers' eligibility. His whole deal there is he spent 2 years at junior college and then completed his 5th college season back in 2024. And then back in December, the NCAA granted him an additional year of eligibility to former junior college players. So there's kind of a holdup going on with his particular eligibility. So we'll have to see what happens with him, but that's going to open up more opportunities for other guys to step in and make a difference potentially. So on defense, along the defensive line, the Broncos have 2 starters that they need to replace up front on the defensive line. Defensive end Ahmad Hassanine and nose tackle Herbert Gums. But head coach Spencer Danielson is excited about the returning talent that he has coming to this team along the trenches. Edge rusher Jaden Virgin Morgan had a breakout sophomore season last year for Boise State, 40 total tackles, 10 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and also had a fumble recovery. So he definitely produced the way you want to see a guy like that produce. 10 sacks, that's, very, very high production in college football from one guy. Defensive tackle Braxton Feely, second team All Mountain West pick a season ago. He will also be back in 2025. He finished his junior season last year with 24 total tackles and 5.5 sacks, so he was productive as well. Boise State did find some front seven help as well in the transfer portal with the additions of Keanu Mailoto from Arizona, Deion Washington from Hawaii, and edge rusher Malachi Williams from Idaho. So Boise State, they led the country in sacks a season ago. They had 55 total sacks. So they could remain strong up front with the addition of those guys and the return of guys like Jaden Virgin Morgan and Braxton Feely. So, they could have a pretty solid defense again. So starting linebackers, though, Marco Notarini and Andrew Simpson are also back, along with full-time secondary starters Amarian McCoy at corner and Jeremiah Irby at corner as well. And then at safety, you had Ty Benefeld and Zion Washington, effectively an 8th returning starter. And Devon Banks is an experienced corner as well. So a lot of guys that are returning that have a ton of experience. But there's some guys on offense, mainly on the running back position, that they really need to address or really need to get production out of, because, it's going to be impossible for those 2 guys to go ahead and try and replicate what Ashton Jeanty did for this offense. But if they can get somewhat close to his numbers, or at least maybe even halfway to his numbers, because his numbers were ridiculous, then they still should be a pretty solid team. Their defense should be solid. Their passing game should be better with some of the additions that they've made. And then, of course, Madsen being hopefully more experienced as we go along in this upcoming season. So Boise State, I could see them be in the playoffs again this coming season. Maybe not have as successful in terms of record-wise, but then again, they are in the Mountain West, which isn't necessarily, the Big Ten or the SEC. So they could find themselves in the college football playoff again. Would not surprise me. But yeah, so that's what I have for your show tonight here. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I always enjoy bringing the shows to you. I know I'm not, maybe not the greatest show host, but I definitely do enjoy our shows here and talking football and things like that. So I can't wait for the season to actually get going here so we can get through some of these filler episodes and actually start talking about some real football. And with the draft coming up in a couple of weeks, we're going to have plenty to talk about with each team. We're going to probably cover each and every one of the NFL teams' picks, throughout every single round, 1 through 7. So look forward to that. But other than that, thank you guys for tuning in to the GSMC Football Podcast, as always, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show and leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. So we also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. Thank you once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful night, and we will see you guys same time, same place tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.